Well, it's another kind of gray day, but it's nice. I mean, spring is coming, and I wanted to show you what Becky brought yesterday. Remember, she called when I was reading, and she sent me this note that says, just a little bonus from scraps to complete the magazine look, pillow shams for the bunks. And it's also a little Easter card, Happy Easter. And she's got a nice little poem in there. We are Easter people. Hallelujah is our song. Anyway, this is, Becky made quilts for the bunk beds that I have in the attic. In the first part of this story, I was telling you how I put all this energy into redoing up on the third floor so that Chip and I could sleep up there, and then Sarah's room became a closet. But in the intervening years, it's now back to being the kids' area for when grandchildren come and either from out of town or from in town. So there's bunk beds now back in the room that was the closet, and Becky made me quilts because they just had these old ratty quilts on them, and she thought there should be something prettier, and so she made quilts that look like this. And then I sent her a picture of them because it sometimes takes her a long time to do these things. So I sent her a picture, and she said it looked just like a magazine, except she didn't like my my pillows that were on top. They were just plain old pillows, which I thought were fine, but she thought it needed to look a little better. So she made me these out of the scraps and dropped them off very carefully on the porch yesterday. So there's that. The other thing I want to tell you, because today's chapter is pretty short, so we have a minute and we can chat if that's okay, if you're not too busy. I just got in from doing the firewood and I'm a little warm. One of you, and maybe it was you, asked me about firewood and how much firewood we go through every winter. And it's about 6 cords, I think, and heats the house, basically. Which is nice. You know, it's nice to feel kind of independent of the world, especially now. It's pretty nice. What I wanted to tell you though too was after yesterday's reading, the Eagles, right, and then I think the one before that was the totem pole, right. I wanted to mention that since the time that this was written, the people in Klukwan, the villagers, have built a what is known as the Jilkat Kwan. That's in Tlingit. It's the proper spelling of Chilkat is Jilkaat, and then the second word is Kwan, Kwaan. It's the Heritage Center and a Bald Eagle Preserve visitor center, and it's been a long time coming, but it came about in a long response, basically, to the issue that I may have alluded to in the totem pole one, that you know, that, and the Chilkat blanket story yesterday too. That you know, when you go to the Museum of Natural History in New York City and you see a bunch of stuff that looks like it came from Klukwan or somewhere near there along this panhandle coast of Alaska, and the village banned the sale of the objects that were clan objects and things that were important to the houses and the clans and the community. And when they did that, they also started a dream of building a place where they could go and be safe, preserved, but also be able to be used by the houses and the clans for ceremonial purposes, and also to keep them in the village and not go off to big museums in big cities somewhere. I mean, the village is really small, as you heard in the story yesterday, and the Heritage Center is a world-class facility. And it's on the edge of the village now when you drive in, so they still aren't really fond of people driving all the way through where everybody lives, but it's on the edge, on the corner of the highway and the Klukwan Road. If when this is all done, if you're going to take a trip to Alaska, you really ought to make sure that you can stop in there. the Heritage Center houses what's known locally as the Whale House artifacts, and in Cluckwan it's the Whale House collection, and it's house posts and wall screens from a clan house, the Whale House in Cluckwan, that were carved in the 1800s, and they are considered pretty much the premier example of Northwest Coast native art, and it's really phenomenal. And when you walk in, the way it's all been done, even it's a spiritual experience. I mean, you can't help it; you get chills when you walk into the very plain new house where the artifacts are, where the collection is. And the other thing I was thinking about is the one thing that strikes me when I go there is there's on one of the posts there's a beautiful woman, a carved face of a woman, and it's not the Northwest Coast ovoids. It's representational. It looks like she's looking right at you, and it looks very real. And I was thinking about that in the story with Wayne's totem pole, where he mentioned that women hadn't been the subjects of poles before, and I don't know that for sure. I don't know all the ins and outs, and again, I apologize if I make a mistake here, but I do know there is a woman on that post in Cluckwan that is really beautiful and really real, and it's just something that I've been thinking about. So anyway, you can Google it. You can go look at what's there and see that. And again, it's JILKAATKWAAN, Jilkatquan, and it's in Cluckwan, Alaska. So that was a bunch to tell you, huh? This chapter 10, is called Snowshoeing with God, a playlist, and the epigraph is, "If I am to do nothing, let me do it gallantly." And that's from the Book of Common Prayer, and that's from a prayer for people who are ill and healing. And this also is interesting, I think, for maybe for you it might be, and how a person puts together a book, and how it also might even apply in some ways to the pandemic. For me, it's very daunting if I start at the beginning and then say I'm going to finish a whole book. It's a long kind of private process, and so instead I write a chapter at a time, shorter pieces, and they're not necessarily in the same order that you hear them now. That comes later with the help of my editor Amy Gash, and this particular chapter was actually a kind of a light little thing I wrote to her when, during the course of working on the book and going back and forth, I would tell her, well, I'm off snowshoeing with my dogs, and I was thinking about this or that, and then I'd come back and I'd work some more. And she asked me what I listened to, what was my playlist when I'm snowshoeing, and I don't. Never had an iPad. I don't listen to podcasts. I don't have Spotify. I usually have the radio on. I listen to KHNS, but I don't wear headphones. I listen to the world, and I listen to the little voices in my head sometimes, and it helps me write. It's very, I talk to myself, or I actually sing to myself. And so I wrote this little piece. I wrote her a little piece about that, and we expanded it. She thought it would be good to include in the book, and we stuck it here. I'm not sure why, but I think it fits. And there's also, in this story, there's my other dogs. I had 3 dogs for many, many years. Forte is a big flat-coated retriever they look like a black golden retriever, and he belonged to a friend of mine in Skagway, but he was a little too rambunctious for them, so they sent him over here to our house when he was about 4. And then we had Phoebe, who was a little terrier that my daughter JJ picked up in a box at the grocery store. And we said, okay. And then there was Mary, who Mary arrived in church on Christmas Eve as a stray dog with Margaret, who's a dog lover. And she brought her to church, midnight mass on Christmas Eve. Our church is pretty informal, it meets in the Choquette Center lobby. And explained at the time we didn't have the Haynes Animal Rescue Kennel. And Margaret at the time said, if no one took this dog home, then she would be destroyed in the next day by the police or somebody, whoever was in charge of doing that with dogs in those days. And of course, I've got all the little children, everybody's crying. And then at the time we had a black lab named Carl, who was in If You Lived Here. I think Mary was probably in that book too. But anyway, Carl and Margaret looked at us and said, well, and you already have black dog hair at your house, Heather, so maybe you could bring her home. And so we did. We brought her home Christmas Eve, and she was pregnant, stray, and we named her Mary, because she came from church on Christmas Eve and was pregnant, and the symbolism was big until the puppies were stillborn. So then we changed her name to Mary, Merry. But those 3 dogs lived with us for a long, long time, and they all happened to die of natural causes right about the same time. And they were like 16 and 14, and Forte got cancer, and he might have been 10 or 11. He was the youngest of the 3. And that's when I ended up getting Pearl, because I was so lonely. We didn't have a dog for about 6 months, and Pearl arrived. And then Trixie's a whole other story. But anyway, that's kind of a long preamble, but thanks for listening. Snowshoeing with God, a playlist. In Shin Buddhism, there is a type of prayer or meditation called deep hearing, which is sometimes translated as hearing the light. This, some practitioners believe, comes when you use your body to pay attention. When you walk, you attend to the walking itself. In Alaska, with a solid 6 months of winter, walking in quiet places often requires snowshoes. I snowshoe with Chip some days, but many days I choose to go alone, sort of. My dogs, Forte, a bouncy, flat-coated retriever, Mary, a gentle 15-year-old gray-faced lab husky mix, and Phoebe, a scrappy terrier who sports a red jacket, come too. When I snowshoe with the dogs, I don't hear the light so much as I do Merle Haggard. And no, I don't have an iPod. The music that accompanies me on these treks is in my head. The walking simply brings it forth. I don't know all the words to the songs that bubble up and out of me as I walk, the ones I hear and then give voice to, so I'll hum and make up a line or two. It seems to me that marching along in the woods, singing, is doing nothing about as gallantly as a person can, as the Episcopal healing prayer says. Hiking is good for the legs, and singing is good for the heart. When you combine the two, at the very least, you'll be prepared to audition for The Sound of Music, although I sing from Oklahoma more often, especially the song about the corn growing as high as an elephant's eye. I like Guys and Dolls too. Luck Be a Lady and If I Were a Bell, I'd Be Ringing, and Fiddler on the Roof. Wonder of wonder, miracle of miracles, God took a Daniel once again, stood by. Don't you love that song? And the other one from Golda and Tevye, do you love me? Do I what? For 25 years I've cooked for him. Ba, 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 ba. 25 years my bed is his. If that's not love, what is? But do you love me? This old couple that can't say it. Anyway, I also love to sing Center Field by John Fogerty. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to play. I'll shout coming around the bend before Moose Meadow. And the thing is, when I do, I believe I just may play shortstop again for my old softball team, the Diehards. I snowshoe that way, sometimes for an hour and a half, sometimes for 3 or 4 or even 5 hours if I go all the way up to the summit. It's not as though I plan to sing. I begin my walk thinking, And I suppose in a way, praying in those informal conversations with God that sometimes feel more as if you're talking to yourself, but that usually manage to help make challenges more manageable and less scary. Once I let the worries off my chest and the humming starts, and soon I'm singing out loud. In Dakota, it's a really good book if you've never read Dakota by Kathleen Norris. She writes that one of the more surprising aspects of monastic life is how frequently monks sing as they attend to chores and their prayers. Singing, she notes, is both play and worship. Sometimes I sing country western favorites, the ones I play when I volunteer at the radio station. Romantic tunes like Jimmy Buffett's Come Monday and Lefty Frizzell's That's the Way Love Goes. Merle Haggard made it a hit. Sings about throwing horseshoes over his left shoulder, searching for four-leaf clovers, and love, the kind of love that is always right there with you. That's the music God made. I'll half hum. That's the do-do-do. Anyway, seeking God's mercy is a lot like wishing for good luck. Both require faith that such a thing is possible. Emmylou Harris had it right when she equated a rosary with a rabbit's foot in another favorite tune of mine, Love and Happiness, which is also on what I like to think of as my Snowshoeing with God playlist. I always feel better after singing Lyle Lovett's God Will, in which he asks an old girlfriend, who will forgive your lying and cheating? And then answers, God will, but I won't. And God does, but I don't. And that's the difference between God and me. It's such a great song. Once, and I hope you don't think I'm completely crazy for sharing this. That's actually more than once. This happens to me a lot. Standing under a really big spruce tree, one that would take 3 or 4 people with linked arms to circle, a tree that I had never even noticed before I was slowed by injuries. I burst into the doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. It practically sang itself. On sleepier mornings, when I don't climb as high, I often pause at a knob overlooking the valley below, and I sing a verse of an old spiritual that Nancy Nash plays after communion in our church. And it goes, when I fall on my knees with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. The way I feel doing that helps me understand why Muslims are moved to drop to their knees facing Mecca 5 times a day. And no matter what month it is, if snow is falling, I nearly always sing Walking in a Winter Wonderland somewhere along the trail. It can't be helped. One afternoon, I went snowshoeing later than usual, and there was a lot on my mind. I had written 4 obituaries in a week, and talking with the families had been hard. It wasn't the first time since my accident that I felt guilty for being alive when other very good people hadn't been as lucky. I decided to climb for an hour and a half and then head back downhill in the long nautical twilight of Alaska's winter nights. That day, with so much on my mind, I sang more softly, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah and the Beatles' I Will. I snowshoed as mindfully as I ever have, tuned to the swish of my footsteps, my steady breath, the snow dropping off a bough, the gray tree trunks, the white ground, and the violet sky. The low sun slanted through the forest in long stripes. There was no wind at all, and it was as silent as snow. The air had a wispy shimmer I'd never seen before. I stepped off the trail and shuffled through the knee-high powder toward a knoll to get a better view of the inlet below. While my dogs watched me curiously, I stood there, doing nothing, for a long moment. God was near, and I listened for his light. Thanks. That was kind of personal to read, but But what I was thinking about with that too is that helps with this, and I think some of the feelings I was feeling then are probably the feelings that those of us who are okay are feeling about the families of the people who aren't, and of the people who are working in the hospitals and clinics and homeless shelters and prisons during this time. And you know, I think it's worth having a little talk to whatever voice you talk to, or singing a little song if that makes you feel better. I also think it's worth noting that all the small moments and all the small stories add up to a book. And if I started at the beginning and had a goal to get to the end, I probably wouldn't be able to do it. And with this pandemic, it sounds like the new normal is going to be kind of similar to what it's like now for a while, maybe longer than a book. You know, and if we take it one story at a time, that might be an easier way to look at it rather than wonder when it's all going to end. And doesn't hurt to sing a little bit while you're waiting. I hope you and yours are well, and thanks for stopping into my kitchen. Now I do my little thing where I turn this off every day. Until next time, take care.